everybody. And we are moving into our workshop portion of our meeting today. And our first of 5 workshops today is the transportation strategy, the Waikato Regional Transportation Model. And it's a presentation that will be delivered to us today by Rachel Algar. Good morning, Rachel. Thank you for making yourself a little bit available a little bit earlier than planned. We managed
Good morning.
We managed to quite fast in our meeting, so take it away. And I believe you've got Brian there. Brian, did you want to introduce the item, or are you happy just for Rachel to launch straight in?
Yep, Madam Chair, happy for Rachel to launch straight in.
Excellent.
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors. Today's about taking you through the results of the Waikato Regional Transportation Model, and also a discussion and conclusions around a Cambridge Third Bridge. I'm also joined by Brian Hudson and David Topman, who will assist with the presentation information today. So if we go. Sorry about this, folks. Oops. So just a reminder about our recommendations. Back in May, through the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee, the recommendation was that if the review of the transport strategy identifies the need for a bridge crossing in Cambridge, the work to identify and designate a route will be funded with initial feasibility work from the Transport Reserve, and any further designation requirements to be funded from external funding. And also an outcome from the Council Transport Strategy Workshop, we came and talked to you back on the 29th of June to come back to the Council and share the results of the Worsham model. Next stream. So just to give you a background on the Waikato Regional Transport Model, it's our most recognised tool for looking at transport trends, patterns, and how people use the network. We use the 3-stage Worsham model to assess what the future could look like with a predominantly car-based transport system. In particular, we wanted to understand future traffic scenarios for Cambridge, Te Awamutu and Kihikihi, where most people live and most growth and changes were planned in the future. So the Worsham model is based on the NIDIA medium land use projections developed from the 2013 census. You'll recall back at our workshop earlier this year that we had quite a discussion about the reasons for using the 2013 census, and unfortunately at that time the model was not available with the update from the 2018 census. As part of the model, part of the inputs for the model, Council staff did an extensive review of current and planned households and employment based on the Waipa growth strategy, structure plans and housing development aspirations. So all of that information was included to run the model. We also inputted any known changes in future new roads, infrastructure, as well as traffic counts to test against the model outputs. For ease of presentation, we presented the results by defining the outputs through a series of level of service maps. The level of service are described in terms of 6 levels designated from A to F, with a level of service A, you'll see those in a minute in the maps, green, where the operating conditions are really good with no delays and free flowing, to the level of service F, which is the worst. Level of service F would be similar to such like a big stuck in Auckland motorway traffic, where traffic comes to a standstill and you're sort of stuck there. That's a poor level of service. So the results that we got, we had the AM peak, 7 till 9 AM, the inter peak, which is in between peak during the day, and the evening peak, which is the 4 till 6 PM peak. So for Cambridge, this is the map for the PM peak, which is presented today as the worst case scenario for the 2021 and 2051 PM peak, when traffic is typically at its worst during the day, when people are returning home from work and education, after school activities, etc., etc. You'll note that around 5 PM is usually typically the slowest, or shows the slowest delays, but the weather model averages for the 2-hour traffic peak between the peak of 4 till 6 PM. Brian, do you want to add to that at all?
Yes, so in looking at these maps, because it is averaged over that 2 hours, in the peak of the peak, as it were, we could expect it to be worse than what's shown there in terms of level of service. But I guess people often have choices, and as traffic congestion gets worse, people do change their trip times or trip routes and things like that to try and find less congested routes. So there is some balancing out in terms of how those trips occur in peaks as congestion gets worse.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So for the 2021 scenario this year, apart from current situation, being in level 3 partial lockdown, for 2021, most of the network continues to have a good level of service green, with some of the main routes such as Victoria Street showing a slightly lower level of service, as you'll see in the yellow. If we look to the future for 2051, most of the network still has a good level of service, shown as green, but some of the main routes such as Cambridge Road, Victoria Street, Shakespeare Street, Hamilton Road, Peak Road show a slightly lower level of service, say level of service C to D, shown up in the yellow and the orange lines. The worst level of service is shown around the Hautapu interchange, which is a level of service E to F.
And maybe if I just step in here and just explain that, around that interchange is a combination really of the employment growth in the Hautapu industrial area, which there will be a lot of employees who will be wanting to leave at that sort of 4:30 to 5:30 time, and to either get onto the expressway to make their journey home if they're travelling further afield, or they're trying to travel through the interchange to get into Cambridge to go home. And that those trips combine with a peak of commuters who are coming back from Hamilton and also using the expressway and want to use the interchange to get into Cambridge. So that's why with the single lanes for all movements around that interchange is why the congestion gets worse there.
So if we move on to the Te Awamutu situation, a lot more green routes here for Te Awamutu now and in the future. Most of the network has a good level of service, green, with a slightly lower level of service, about C, at some of the key roundabouts, typically on State Highway 3, such as Sloane and Vale Street and Arawata Cambridge Road roundabouts. Note for Kihikihi, the results for the future transport scenario showed a level of service green, meaning A level of service.
Yeah. And again, if I just make a comment here, this is what we would logically expect with Te Awamutu, that the majority of the routes are free flowing now, and where we see some difficulties are at some of the smaller roundabouts or at intersections like Benson Road and Ohaupo Road, or Carlton Street and Kihikihi Road, where it's just a give way sign and you've got to pick a gap in two directions of traffic to get out onto the highway. So as the highway gets busier, some of those intersections where where you want to make a right turn or something like that, it's going to be quite difficult, and hence a lower level of service.
Through you, Madam Chair, am I allowed to ask a question at this point, or is it better to wait till the end?
I'm open to questions. Yeah.
The question I had about the Te Awamutu peak is really, it doesn't show T1 and T2.
By all means, I think now is probably.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, Brian, you can see that the map doesn't really show T1 and T2, which has got some massive, increase in houses there. And I'm not expecting it would actually create too many issues like with the Patarangi Road intersection or going along Rewe Street, but did the modelling cover that particular development?
Yep, so you're right, T1 and T2 on Rewe Street and Parongia Road are just off the edge of the map there, but because they are residential subdivisions and then at those peak times, they won't be large flows of traffic either in or out. Really what we see with Te Amutu is that the roads that really start to get filled up with traffic are in and around the state highway and just the main arterial roads. So that's where we would expect to see a bit of congestion happening, where we see it happening now and where we would expect it to progress in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask a question, please?
Go for it, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I don't know if you've seen a paper that I distributed around everybody yesterday, but my real concern is that the population projections from NIDIA have not included the development on C1, C2, C3 and C4. And in fact, that's reflected very much in that the two pictures of the grid and the levels of surface. The existing population areas of Cambridge, you can see are all defined in terms of a grid, but that style of grid, even at 2051, is not reflected on the level of residential activity that's going to occur. Now, even if you take the most conservative assessment, C1, C2, C3, C4 is going to mean an increase in population to 2035 of possibly close to 10,000 new residents. Now, that has not been reflected in that grid. So I'm really concerned that those levels of service that you indicate are going to be actually different to what's going to happen for intertown transport that's going to block our streets up.
Maybe Rachel, if you just want to flick back in the slideshow to the Cambridge street pattern. Yes, so for C1, C2, C3, while we haven't shown on the map all of the minor roads that will be within those growth cells connecting up the residential area, we have shown the main connections, which is where we, and so within the transport model, we've shown the main connections. So certainly all of the residential growth that's in those areas will connect to those main roads. And of course, within the model, the number of households, population and growth in those areas has been reflected in the traffic predictions. So certainly I take your point, while the individual street networks and those growth cells are not demonstrated because we don't know exactly what they'll look like yet. Certainly the traffic coming out onto the main roads and the households are all represented in the models. And so the congestion, where you'd expect to see it on the arterial roads in the vicinity of those growth cells, is a reflection of that additional population.
Well, yeah, but I still question that, Brian, because if you go back to the NIDIA projections that you shared with us, and I've got it all based on the SC2 areas, with the population being forecast 18, 25, 35, 45, 55, and 65, those population projections don't concur with the projected levels of development that are going to occur in Cambridge. In fact, the 2035 population projections on which that model is based is only showing a population of 37,000. Well, Cambridge is going to be, and that's across both rural and urban Cambridge, which estimations are that that could be 42, 43,000 by 2035. So the population base on which this model is based is on a totally incorrect population.
I'd have to ask David Topman to help us with that point, because I think he's probably more aware of that.
Yeah.
Councillor Roger Gordon and I have had a few conversations about population and population projections. And I think, as I've said to elected members in talking about population and population projections, the one truism is that you're always wrong with population projections. You're talking about 2035 population projections, and it is, in all honesty, when you're looking at population projections, we have a level of confidence probably for 10 years, and beyond that, it's getting into the realms of, it's an estimate at best. And it's simply based on a model doing a projection forward based on current information. And that's why it is really important that we review and update our population projections as often as we do. So currently, you'll know that we're obliged to do this assessment of urban development capacity. And in doing that, we have to review our population projections that underscore that. So we've done one now. We had the NIDIA population projections in 2021, which, as you know, factored in the impact of COVID. So what COVID's done is brought the population projections down, and we're seeing it now. Stats NZ have released their population estimates, and one of the things I can share with you, Auckland stopped growing in 2020. It had a net population loss. Well, it had a loss of population for the first time ever in its history of just over 1,000 people. So more people left Auckland than went into Auckland. Waipa had a gain. We ranked 10th on the list, but it's nowhere near the population growth we were getting a year before. So it's come down already, and until we see international migration resume on any scale, we have no chance for population gain other than from interregional migration. And the key source of that would be either from Hamilton or from Auckland, principally. And currently, the growth that we have seen, it's not natural increase. It's primarily on people moving into Waipa from elsewhere in the country. And that is the primary basis of growth. So going forward, we know currently in the short term, there's a big decrease in growth pressure coming. Beyond that, we don't know. We've got our NIDIA projections. We do know census is going to be run again in 2023, and we will be doing our next review of population projections on the basis of that. So it's a case of, we're in a period of huge uncertainty. We know we're dealing with growth right now. We know consents are still at record levels, but going forward, we know the drivers of growth are just not there anymore. And so we can see in the next couple of years, if we carry on doing the development we're doing, we're quite likely to get to the point where we see a tapering off in the development pressures we've been experiencing. That's a current perspective. Living under COVID, it's not going away anytime soon. Resumptions of international travel are at best speculative at this stage. And so looking forward as far as 2035 and saying what the population will be or won't be, it's an estimate, and what we're working with is NIDIA. It's an agreed projection basis for all our work currently, and you can disagree with those projections, and as I've said, they're highly likely to be wrong, but that's what we work with. That's kind of our best estimate currently, because that's what we're informed by people who do the work, you know, the demographers. And as I say, that's the basis for this work, and it's gone into this work. I certainly worked with Rachel on putting the population as best we could into the modelling figures. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, David.
If I'd like to just go on from there, because you know, all of the signals that we're receiving from our developers that we've addressed at council over the last couple of months, is showing that the level of development is actually extremely strong, very strong indeed. And in fact, the WRTM that we're actually putting a lot of store in, you know, when you look historically, they actually predicted that the level of traffic would reduce in the last couple of years, when in fact we know that it's been increased. And when you look at that Cambridge plan and you look at the level of service that is indicated on the 2021 plan around the St Andrews Corner, for instance, with the 4 roads coming in to there, it's showing an acceptable level of service. Well, I've got to tell you, from the local residents of Cambridge, that's not an acceptable level of service, that we are getting congestion at possibly 3 peak times during the day. So I can't see why we're still saying that that accepted level of service is going to be okay for the next 10, 15 years. It's not.
Perfect.
Yep.
Brian, did you want to address that? And then Philip and Claire.
Yes, I was just going to say, just remember that these what's shown here for level of service is the average over that 2-hour period. And for, I guess, the majority of the time that any of us make trips around Cambridge, we are not held up in long queues. We don't get long delays in just about anywhere in Cambridge. But you're right, at those very peak times, morning, midday and evening, there is some congestion around that Hamilton Road, Victoria Road, and you know, a queue through the main street of town when everybody tries to leave straight after work. So those are short-term congestion sort of peaks at the moment that we have, and in most cities that is still classed as a very good level of service, because you know, we know if we were to live in Tauranga, Auckland, parts of Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch, that those peaks of travel and congestion and delays go on for a long, long time. So it is relative to people's perception and what they're used to. Yeah.
Are you saying, Brian, that the level of service that we're now seeing in Cambridge over that peak time is acceptable?
Yes, I'd say on the whole, it is still very good in comparison to other large towns or cities. It is still a very good level of service, yes. And most residents in those other places would be envious of the level of service that we have.
And you're willing to go public on that statement?
Well, I guess we're live on YouTube, so we have, yes. Yeah.
And also the fact that we're going to get another 10,000 people that are going to move into Cambridge in C1, C2, C3, and C4 is not going to impact that level of service at that St Andrews roundabout as people try and get in and out of town to do their shopping and to move to and from work. So you're going to say that as that development occurs, that increase in traffic there will be acceptable in the next 10 years?
No, I guess you can see the progression towards 2051, that Cambridge Road, Victoria Street will become steadily more congested with that increased traffic, especially if everybody in those new zones is all wanting to travel on the network in the peak times. So the level of service definitely drops. It drops in that 2-hour average time as shown by the model, but it will drop. It will be worse in places and at times in the peak of the peak, when a lot of employees, leave their jobs at 5 and want to travel home. So the model definitely demonstrates that. And I'm certainly not suggesting that council would make no investments at all in passenger transport, active modes of transport, and other road improvements which would manage that increase in traffic over time.
I've already shared with you a document that shows that the urban mobility for walking and cycling will not actually reduce the traffic flow in Cambridge, because the traffic flow will increase from growth, even accepting the success of the strategy. So I don't think we can put our hat on the cycling and walking strategy to reduce any traffic on that key arterial roads, right?
Yes, I agree. There's not one silver bullet for these things. It will be a whole program of activities which will manage the transportation network going forward.
I still can't accept the fact that it's acceptable, the level of traffic that we're going to have in Cambridge.
Philip,
yeah,
did you have a question?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Been a little while since I put my hand up, so I have to hopefully get my point across. But so just with these population growths, going back onto that, with 2051, I think David mentioned that, after 10 years, it's a bit of a guess, but with our long-term plan this year, we did a presentation to the Chamber, and one of the slides on that presentation was that by 2050, our population would be 28,000. Now, we all realised at the time when we saw that was not accurate. Our population is almost 28,000 now. So I think you mentioned that your census that you're working on is from 2013. That you've done your study on, and thanks, Rachel, for your report. And so that's just that one. And then just to go to the level of service and carrying on with what Roger was saying, with where the BP is and St Andrews roundabout is there, now there's the last count, there was 23,000 car movements a day going through there. That's 23,000 local people going through there. Before the expressway opened, there was 20,000 people going through there, or cars going through there, and that was a state highway one. So it's increasing dramatically. So yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to say anyway. Thank you.
Now, Claire, did you have a question or observation? And then we'll cut back for Rachel to finish her slide.
I guess it's an observation, or just contributing some ideas. I mean, it's really important for us to have a really robust discussion about what the population growth might be. But this is about traffic, which is to do with, the drivers of, I guess, why people are on the roads and at certain times of the day. I'd just like to clarify, Phil, you said that we were almost at 28,000 people living in Cambridge now. I did look up, and it's at the moment, 2021, there's 15,192. So there's a difference between residents and the number of traffic movements.
I would question that figure dramatically. I really question that, because it's at least 20 now.
I think you've got to look at whether it's what we call urban Cambridge or Cambridge and environs. And if you look at Cambridge and environs, which actually incorporates Mangatautari, and there are a lot of traffic movements, for instance, school traffic coming in from rural Cambridge, and rural Cambridge is actually 27,393 as at the 2018 census. So that's there proven. And we just can't say that all the traffic is those that are generated from within the city. It's got to be Cambridge and rural Cambridge, because a lot of people do come into the town.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
And figures have been publicised this last 12 months this year that Cambridge urban is 20,000 now. So
yeah,
I wonder if I could. I'm just going to interrupt and let's have Rachel finish her presentation, and we can perhaps revisit this at the end if there are still other questions. Oh, quickly, Claudia.
Yeah, well, I was going to say there's other factors that affect the amount of traffic on the road too, because with COVID, we've actually had a lot more people learning to work from home. And I'm actually expecting that's a trend that's going to continue into the future, which will reduce the traffic flows. And then we also have some serious work being done on reducing our emissions. And so while we're sort of used to the low levels of public transport use and, other urban mobility programs or whatever, but I do think that there'll be a lot more pressure in the future to actually achieve a great deal more of people using those sort of modes of transport. So while I accept that Roger has put forward that on his assessment, it's not really going to have the degree of effect, but I would say with more sort of pressure to reduce our emissions, I would expect that there would be a larger uptake. So perhaps, Rachel might be able to comment on that. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Councillor St Pierre. That's a very, very good point. And there are, as you'll get to understand with the draft transport strategy coming out as well, that we have a lot of opportunities, and we're being directed by government policy to really look at mode shift and to other modes like walking, cycling, public transport, and reducing our transport emissions and commitment to climate change, net zero reductions. So there's a lot of information coming out, and there's a strong direction from the New Zealand Transport Agency as well, is that any transport projects that are put up have to look at how we are committing to climate change reduction. And mode shift. So there's a very clear direction coming through that policy. Just to finish the conversations about the transport model, another interesting information that has been able to be pulled out of our running of the transport model is our vehicle trips. And we've got a couple of, this is for our outputs for the Wharton model. So we were able to look at vehicle trips on average through the data that was provided through the New Zealand Transport Survey, I understand. So what it found was for our 2021 trips, that 32% of vehicle trips were 6 Ks or less. And also if smaller or shorter trips, 19% were vehicle trips 3 Ks or less. So we have a real opportunity in our towns to look at how we move around through our new urban mobility networks, through linking in with the Hamilton Waikato mode metro spatial plan and opportunities that come out of the business case, to really look at how we move around some of those trips for 6 Ks or less. A lot of people are investing in e-bikes, and also for shorter trips, micro mobility scooters, trips to schools, those sort of things. So that's quite a large amount of local trips that are actually done by vehicles. Any comments before we move on to the?
I think it's good. I can see that there's going to be a big mode shift in how we do transportation, like Claire says. Like electric scooters and things like that are going to be much more common. And I think we have to look at things like, the PG, the Cambridge cycleway and stuff like that, and making sure those types of walkways have concreted and made good so that people will use them because we don't have to use cars.
Yeah, and I'd like to support Marcus as well. I've got an e-bike. I live out at Pirongia. I can bike into Tiomuru in less than half an hour. But a lot of the places in the CBD don't actually have bike stands that you can, lock a bike onto, like for instance, my medical centre, things like that. I did mention it to them and they said, oh gosh, yeah, that's a good idea. So I think businesses are becoming aware that people do want a bike or use scooters or whatever, and that it's perfectly a feasible way of getting around.
That's clear. Any other questions for Rachel before she moves on? Andrew, are you just playing with your screen or?
Thanks. Thank you, Susan. I just want to support what Claire and Marcus have said. And I think, look, there's a lot of rhetoric coming out of Scotland already, but at some point we have to take climate change seriously, and it's going to mean a big change to our transport industry. There's going to be an awful lot of cars, I think, go off the road and stay off the road. We're going to have a smaller fleet in future. And I know no one's saying anything about driverless cars at the moment, but I don't think it's gone away. I think that potential is still there, and it's going to make things like small passenger vehicles on demand much cheaper, much more practical. And I think to be investing enormous amounts of money in creating more roads for vehicles to go on at this point in time would be a bad policy. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Liz, did you have something to add?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Look, I just have a little bit of sympathy, I guess, for what Roger was talking about earlier. What we've seen, of course, with Cambridge is a massive change in a short period of time. And I think a lot of this comes back to people's expectations around what our levels of service in Cambridge should be and what they used to be. So I'm actually wondering if we've done, have we done enough work in our engagement and I guess connecting back with our community in Cambridge about what the future does hold, because I think we're in a territory at the moment where, because it was such a short time ago that we could freely drive around Cambridge without any delay, we all remember that really clearly, and I just don't think at the moment there's a lot of tolerance for delays, but we have to somehow build up a picture about what the future might hold around some of the ideas that we've got. And I know we have done a lot of work in this area, but I'm not sure that we're getting through because there is a lot of anxiety, and 3 o'clock is a nightmare around Cambridge at the time, with school runs and things like that. So I appreciate new technology. I appreciate the future looks different, but it's probably around how our community is accepting of those changes that have happened in a really short period of time. And I think that's where we've got a little bit of a clash at the moment. So somehow or another, we need to perhaps do some work in that area.
Yeah, Liz, I kind of have some level of sympathy for that comment, and sometimes it comes down to timing too, doesn't it? It's about whether they all happen at the same time, or the combination of all that mode shift and working from home and reduction in our fleet. Is that all going to happen at the same time, or that we have an increased these growth cells come online? Is it going to be quite a mismatch? Will there be struggles before these other things take up? So yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to timing and getting people into that space to accept that that's a changed future for them. Claire.
I thought, Liz, you've raised some really great points there, actually, and I'm wondering if we do need to keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, particularly in Cambridge, on those pinch points or those times of the day that are causing issues. Like if it is actually school runs, now that is something that can be managed, with a little bit of proactivity from the schools themselves as well. I've heard about scheduling arrivals and departures at different times just to take away that high peak. And also I know that a lot of work's been done on safe ways for kids to get to school, without the use of cars and things. But I think maybe we should be asking staff to make sure that those traffic counts or monitoring particular areas, that we need to be well informed about it. so that, you know, we can be looking at strategies to alleviate that thing. Because in a way, although it's part of the traffic model, but I don't sort of see it as something that can't be handled separately from these sort of long-term sort of progress. I suppose I see them as forecasts where we're looking at really long-term planning for infrastructure and that. But I'd like to see a sort of much more sort of short-term approach to some of these things. Yeah, perhaps the other Cambridge councillors might have a different view.
Can I just come back just on a comment with Claire's spreading the load in terms of some of the peak times. If you look at the combined bridge traffic, the peak time is no longer a single hour. The peak time on cross-bridge traffic actually is from 3 o'clock through until 6 o'clock. So it's a pretty consistent level of high volume over those 3 hours. So I think that the idea of spreading it further, that's already kind of been investigated and people are trying to do that, and it's still giving us the level of congestion that we've got.
Okay, how about we just let Rachel continue on with her presentation? I'm just mindful of time.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. So just moving on, because the second half of this presentation is all about the Cambridge Third Bridge. And obviously there's been a lot of discussion about that and community concerns regarding growth and the need to designate land for the future, for a future bridge crossing. Just to give you a bit of background, Victoria Bridge and Ferguson Bridge provide 2 river crossing points between Cambridge and Leamington. Victoria Bridge opened in 1907. It's narrow, light vehicles and a speed restriction. It's also got heritage status. Becca obviously do a lot of ongoing monitoring, and their recent resilience investigation showed that the structural integrity of the Victoria Street Bridge is sound for at least the next 30 years. There was also a report completed in 2018 that concluded if traffic follows predicted estimates and lifespan of the Victoria Bridge is maintained, demand across the bridges will remain below capacity to at least 2041. So just recently, we've obviously run the WRTM results, and Victoria Street and Ferguson Street bridges levels of service at the peak across that whole peak time for the future 2051 showed minimal delays, not highlighting the need for additional capacity. We'd also like to raise the point that further opportunity through the Cambridge Urban Mobility Network plan and will enable more people walking and cycling. That will slow that traffic demand. There's also a strong desire through the Cambridge Concept Plan refresh to have a more people-centred town centre with more people walking and cycling. So just to reiterate, those 2 bridges there, Ferguson Street and Victoria Street, the results of the WRTM modelling is a level of service CD, stable flow, minimal delays.
Can I come in with a question, Rachel?
How about we just let Rachel bring her discussion on this to a conclusion, and then we can talk, because otherwise it gets a bit piecemeal.
Sure, if I just conclude and be good. So in our conclusions for the Cambridge Third Bridge, our conclusions are that a new bridge is needed in the longer term. However, the bridge is adequate for future growth and will be ongoing monitored. Our conclusion is that basically at some point a bridge would be needed, and let's start planning for it now. Our bridge would be subject to new growth. However, major changes in land use in Cambridge or wider, such as the Southern Links and the connections there, and the potential for Southern Links to change transport patterns, particularly for people in Cambridge, or if Victoria Street Bridge was obviously closed to traffic. A new bridge would create opportunities for a walking and cycling bridge, more livable town centre, and protect the heritage status of the Victoria Street in the future. There has been inclusion of the third bridge in the Waipā 2021-2051 infrastructure strategy. So with the basis in mind, and at some point that a bridge would be needed in the future, our recommendations would be to proceed with the business case in year 2 of the long-term plan, subject to funding approval through the annual plan and Waka Kotahi funding subsidy. However, we would like to start this work after a number of other key pieces of work have been completed. That would be key inputs into this business case, and that would be confirming the future transport network for Southern Links, the Hamilton Waikato Metro Spatial Plan business case, which is currently underway, that looks to rapid transit networks, urban multimodal connections, with the inclusion of Cambridge and Te Awamutu and links into Hamilton, and the Waipā Community Spatial Plan, which is underway as well, and any potential changes to land use that come out of that piece of work. So our business case scope would include reviewing the transport network, including the bridges, in line with current policies and strategies and key projects. The bridges would be included as part of the wider transport network. So it would be a detailed business case looking at transport pinch points around the whole of Cambridge, including wider network and safety improvements in Cambridge. The future use of the Victoria Street Bridge, and we've called it a retirement strategy, looking at the use of our bridge while maintaining its heritage status and the opportunities there. We would have to run through a MCA analysis, multi-criteria analysis, which would range in a number of options, such as doing minimum to a whole range of the high cost infrastructure required for a new bridge. With preferred option, planning requirements, timeframes and costs. And just to conclude, we've got some next steps in how this work would incorporate into the transport strategy. We have a council workshop next week on the 9th of November to look at the draft strategy and inclusion of a number of projects, including the Cambridge Third Bridge. The approval of the draft strategy by the 16th of November with stakeholder engagement and adoption of the final strategy in December. Any questions?
So,
hold on. Roger, Jim, and then Phil.
Good, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, certainly support the proceeding with the business case, and thank you for identifying that. I just wanted to register that our continual reliance on the 2018 Becker report, I think there are certain statements in that Becker report that are now so out of date that I think we should just put that Becker report on the shelf and leave it there and look more at the updated stats that we're getting from our traffic counts that have occurred across the bridges, and certainly the ones that were done in 2021 give a different picture. But yes, very happy to see it being a business case in year 2. So thank you.
Okay.
Mayor Jim.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And look, I agree with Roger's comments in terms of including it in establishing the business case, because my understanding of the situation is that the major concern from the community is that we don't appear to have a plan for the future. And we can argue and discuss how quickly we're going to reach these pinch points and problems. But and with, you know, the accuracy of a crystal ball that David's talking about is not good. But at some point, we've got to accept that we are going to need changes to our transport structure, and including a third bridge. And it's really just giving the public confidence that we're not going to end up boxed into a corner, not knowing where to go when the problem becomes gridlock. We've got to be have enough forward thinking to make sure that we can activate any changes without causing disruption to the community. So I think the real important point here is to make sure that we have a fact-based plan going forward, and the timing may change, but we at least demonstrate that we know what we're going to be doing in the future. So look, I certainly support that business case to get on with the planning as soon as possible.
Thanks, Jim. Phil, Mike, then Claire.
Yeah, just briefly following on a little bit from what Jim was saying, you're really supportive of the business case, and I think we all agree, and the public agree. You know, it's not the bridge. We're not after a bridge right now. It's the corridor that they want identified for the future, so that there is a plan in place, and other developments can then grow around it as well and plan around it, so that the developments grow around the bridge, not the bridge grow around the developments any further. So, you know, really welcome that report, that business case that we're going to start, well, that workshop we're starting on next week, I think it was, with those dates, and then the next financial year as well. So it's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Mike, Claire, then Liz.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Just a couple of points I'd just like to raise around the bridge. People talk about a third bridge, but you know, in this presentation here, you know, it is very evident that it's not really a third bridge. By the time this thing is possibly built, we're looking at retiring the existing bridge from its current use. It may have other uses, but it's probably not the current use. So I guess what in that feasibility study, it would also be good to see what additional capacity this new bridge would actually generate. As one of the scenarios of retiring the old bridge to a cycling, walking maybe bridge, or whatever we're looking at doing with it. And I guess the scenario of retaining the Victoria Bridge, and it can continue on if that's what we're also thinking when this thing's built, and there is genuinely three bridges. So, you know, I don't want the community to get their hopes up that there's actually going to be a third bridge means three bridges, because my understanding is that's not necessarily correct. I mean, we're talking maybe 30 years away. I've said the Victoria Bridge has got at least 30 years of life expectancy. It's got a historical, I don't know, whatever it is, a historical sort of banner against it, so it has to be retained, obviously. So yeah, I just would like that considered in the feasibility study also, just so it's nice and clear to our community.
Thanks, Mike. Claire, Liz, then Graham.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm interested in the cost of the business case. Because I only want to see the third bridge built if it's really needed. It's incredibly expensive for us, and I can actually foresee that there might be changes, in the way we grow and the way we use our cars and things like that might actually, in the long term, make it an expensive sort of extra for us, because it is a big burden on our community. And just on that, I guess Roger's made some good points about the delays that are being experienced at the moment. So I'd really like some great clarity around the traffic counts that are going to be done, and also the actual delays that are being experienced, so we can really understand the inconvenience that's being caused by the shortfall in capacity and things like that. So that we can make some good decisions on good evidence. Thanks.
Liz, then Graham.
Yeah, I guess Claire, really agree with your comment there. We really need to fully understand the economic impact this is going to have, and whether this is something that Cambridge is going to have to, fundraise for, or whether this is a district-wide thing. And the presumption's always been it's district-wide, but yeah, we need to make some kind of agreement around this table as well. I just want to make sure that the bigger, picture is at play here as well. And it was really great to see that Southern Link's timing is a really critical part of this. For me, it's always been really critical that we understand when that bridge is going to be built and exactly where there are plans in place, land is being purchased. So I just want to somehow get my finger on exactly when that bridge is going to go in, but also not to forget that Mercury, our hydro dam, as Cambridge grows, that is going to become part of, potentially become part of urban Cambridge as well. So that's another factor to consider in the business case going forward.
Graham.
Thank you. Yeah, Liz, the Southern Links is up for review. I don't know whether you heard that. I don't quite know what that means, but it's up for review. Okay. Just as somebody that lives very, very close to the high level bridge, the hold-ups aren't as drastic as they've been made out today, and it's still a pretty good level of service. What I would like to see happen, there's a bit of a time frame here. If you're working in the CBD and you've got parked in Halley's or Anzac Street or Alpha Street or Millicent or New World, you're not going to go up to the roundabout by the town hall. You're going to proceed over towards Leamington where you are going. The community board has submitted that there needs to be a time frame for a roundabout at the end of Duke and Achilles and Williamson. Nobody goes down there because you cannot get out onto the road going across the Leamington and low level bridge. Now, I don't know where that sits in the plan, but if some emphasis could be put on that, I believe it'll have a substantial alleviation of the traffic all heading down to the high level bridge. Thank you.
It's an excellent point, Graham. Andrew, are you waving your hand around? And then Mike.
Sorry, Mike was before me, but I'd like to go after, if I may.
Oh, Mike, then Andrew.
Thank you, Conser. Hey, just a couple more points. One is I've just thought about through this conversation. The other I forgot to mention before, sorry, is one that was there was a recommendation from the Cambridge Historical Charitable Trust when it wound up. There was $750,000 there, and somehow it needs to come to the council table as a recommendation to be considered. That could be put towards the feasibility study. That was the request or the suggestion that it could be used for from that trust. So I'd like to see that brought to the to the council table for consideration. That will help with the feasibility study. And the second thing, of course, is if it's deemed that at the end of the day a third bridge is required, and then the land has to be purchased when it's been identified, this $22 million, which we haven't asked for, but is going to come our way from the government if all goes ahead with the Three Waters. Some of that could be put aside for some future land purchase, so it's not just all on ratepayers. I mean, we could use that for nice to haves, but if this becomes a must have down the track, as they say, there's never the cheapest day to buy land is today's sort of thing. So just another thing that we can consider if we're sort of trying to sensibly move forward with this without burdening ratepayers too greatly.
Thanks, Mike. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, thanks to Rachel and David for the presentation, which I found extremely interesting. And I just want to make a comment about David's remarks regarding growth, and that what I read into it was that basically we're expecting growth to level off, at least, if not possibly, be a bit more than that. And yeah, that could well happen. And look, Roger, just a comment to you, as far as developers are concerned, I wouldn't put all my faith in their predictions, because like developers have got to great track record, like the rest of us, of not foreseeing when things are going to go slow. And we've been through probably 2008, so 13 years of sustained growth, which in our history is very unusual. It'd be very surprising if we don't come to a slowing down of that growth at some time in the not too distant future, which will have an impact on everything, of course. So the third bridge, I agree with Jim's comments and well, everyone has spoken. The third bridge is, or as Mike says, another bridge is going to become a necessity at some point. The high-level bridge will have a use-by date, and one of the things about another bridge is it can be designed for more than simply cars and trucks, etc. So cycling and walking would, I think, become a real point about that. I agree with Claire also, however, until we get to the point where we can sell this to Waikato, well, I would not be in favour of it until we get to that point. And that's all about the business case and, everything else. So, yeah, no, great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. Look, it's been a bit of a quick fire throwing ideas, thoughts, responses and concerns at you guys, at both of you, Rachel and Brian and David. Have you guys, just to pull this all together and to conclude, have you got any specific issues that were raised by members that you want to tidy up and put to bed or flesh out before we bring this matter to a conclusion? So I think we covered a lot of territory there in terms of people's views, but obviously there's a fairly solid round of support for that business case to proceed.
Yeah. No, thank you, Chairperson. It was a really good discussion, and we'll go away and consolidate our notes and come back to you.
Fantastic. Bruce, did you want to have the final words, as long as it's not sexist?
Yeah, no, that won't be very long. My biggest concern from a planning point of view would be to protect the location of that third bridge, like the Te Awamutu Western Bypass. That's all been done in case of the future. That would be my biggest concern, that the best place now, you might have 2 or 3 points, whether from planning perspective, you look after that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that might be the final word. So thank you, Rachel and David, and
thank you, everyone.
And Brian. Really interesting. You've got a pretty good steer about where we're all at, and a whole bunch of ideas and thoughts floating around people's heads there. So thank you very much. Look forward to you coming back in due course. So that leads us then to our next workshop, which is Tawfiq with the Lakeside Reserves Concept Plan. Thank you for waiting, Tawfiq. You're going to appear on my screen somewhere here, aren't you? Oh, there you are.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Still morning, just.
12 minutes. Just made it. I'll just share my screen now.
Thank you.
So if I can, through the chair, while Tawfiq is sharing his screen, just really identify that this presentation to you is regarding some funding that we do have within the LTP for our Lakeside reserves. So Tawfiq will provide an overview of our reserves and the work that we would like to do to develop concept plans and then implement those concept plans. So hand over to you, Tawfiq, and you can take us through your slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. So today, as Ellie said, I'm here to talk to you about our Lakeside reserves. So Waikato River Valley and its associated lakes, they've been identified as a national and regional asset. And one of the critical components of these are the Lakeside reserves. So as part of the workshop, I want to give you the process we will be following to develop the concept plan. We have already undertaken some initial thinking of these reserves, so and also identify the stakeholders. So I want to present that to you and get your feedback on that as well. So WIPA administer Lakeside reserves on the shore of Lake Karapiro and Lake Arapune. As part of this project, we will be looking at developing concept plan for Keely's, Moanaroa, Bob's, Hororo, Bulmer Landing, and Arapune Landing reserves. Waipuki Park already has a concept plan, but with the recent land acquisition on the north of the park would require further developing the concept plan. So that this will be managed separately from this project as well, working with the Waipuki working group. At the same time, South Waikato District Council also manages Little Waipa and Jones Landing Reserve. And some of the issue that we currently face in our Lakeside Reserve, which I will talk to you in the next slide, they'll be experiencing the similar issue as well. So part of this work would be touching base with them to understand how they are dealing with those issues, and just to ensure there's a consistency between our reserve and the South Waikato District Council reserves. In terms of the challenges, most of our reserves, especially one by the Lake Karapiro, the access is through State Highway 1, so there is a challenge to access. Our Lakeside reserves been hugely popular among the Freedom campers. That brings its own challenges with it. So their expected level of there's a gap between the expected level of service and our current level of service. So part of this work would be looking into how we can improve our site to meet those expectations, but at the same time, because these reserves are on the shore of Lake Karapiro and Arapune, we need to look at how we can protect our environment as well. In terms of the facilities, we have toilet facilities which are small in the number, and there's no provision in this for the showers as well. And in terms of the signage, we don't have clear signage for these reserves. And with the concept plan, it is an opportunity for us to undertake further restoration and succession planting. So these are some of the issues we will be answering as part of this project. Some of the key principles for this concept plan, Council adopted Lakeside Reserve Management Plan back in 2008. So the management plan provides us the guidance regarding the development, management, and protection of these reserves. And I have various policies regarding the parking, camping, landscaping. We would be ensuring that this concept plan aligns with the reserve management plan. With the concept plan project, we would also develop a draft action plan, which is a high-level implementation plan. What it will do in turn will help us to prioritize the project, and at the same time look at develop a high-level cost for various projects that comes out of it. One of the key principles is also to work with Manawhenua to develop this reserve and give effect to Treaty of Waitangi. At the same time, give effect to the vision and the strategy of Waikato River. Just these some of the key principles that will be used. So next few slides, I will be talking about our Lakeside Reserve, giving a bit of an overview of where they are and access, and then talks more about our initial thinking for the developing these reserve. So first one, Keely's Recreational Reserve is located on the shore of Lake Karapiro. Access is through State Highway 1. In terms of facility, at the moment, we got boat ramp and toilet on it. This reserve is kind of like 3 terraces. So we have a flat surface on top, then we got a sharp drop, then another flat with then another sharp drop and more flat area there. So there's kind of like 3 terraces. In terms of our initial thinking, we currently facing a huge litter issue at this reserve, where people just dumping on household litter as well. So we need to work how we can address that issue. Same time, as I said initially, that we would looking at developing the reserve signage for all of these reserve, just to understand, show them the different zone and the regulation that the people needs to adhere to. At the same time,
can I just interrupt for a minute there? I think Liz, you've got your hand up. Have you got a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we should just ask questions as we're going through each spot. So, hey, really excited about this piece of work, actually. So just addressing, like you said, the dumping, and I'm always really embarrassed, actually, when I drive by on a Sunday night, often on State Highway 1, the overflowing rubbish bins and things as well. I'm wondering, if we need to incorporate in these plans cameras around just trying to kind of sort the overflowing bins, but also any tipping that might be happening. I'm just wondering if right from the outset, if we just kind of plan for that. It is a really unsavoury place to be, and very late at night, I understand from local police as well. So those cameras could be probably quite welcomed there. And I'm probably questioning whether we, have any public bins at all. That seems to be quite a popular thing to do. But yeah, overall, really, really supportive of this plan. The toilets for me are, in desperate need for a change, let's just say. I think when you set a standard so low as those toilets that are currently there, you set a standard for the whole sort of space. So yeah, any improvement in that area would be, I think, really, really good for the benefit of everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Liz, for the feedback. Yes, definitely. And that's why we are kicking off this piece of work, because we do have these facilities, but they are not to the expected level of service where it needs to be. So your feedback regarding the toilets, yes, definitely we'll take it into account. We do have a bin by the toilets there at the moment as well. And one of our initial thinking that because of the literature and stuff like that, perhaps remove the bin and promote people to do pack in, pack out sort of thing. That was again, this is just our initial thinking as well.
Jim, did you have a question or comment?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, it's not a specific comment to this particular layout, but I just wonder whether we need to be thinking before we start designing all of these small reserves, whether we need to have a bit of an overview on what we actually mean by freedom camping, because there's no such thing. All it means is our ratepayers are subsidising other people's holiday, and the more provision that we make for freedom camping, the more it costs, and people are not contributing towards those costs. And the more we provide freedom camping, the less economic it is for people to actually establish commercial camping grounds. There's unfair competition. People can pull in here, then we start getting demands for better toilets, showers all of a sudden. So where did freedom camping come into all of this? So look, I just wonder whether by encouraging freedom camping, it's causing a blockage to people establishing commercial campgrounds, and we're just running up additional costs that the ratepayers are having to meet for people that are just travelling around and not contributing towards the facilities that we're providing. So, and a number of these sites that we're talking about today are pretty constrained. It doesn't appear to me that many of them would be able to be big enough to actually establish a commercial enterprise on. So we're just creating a whole lot of problems for ourselves when these areas are really should be just available for daytime use, I would suggest.
Yeah, can I just jump in there, Susan? I totally agree with you, Jim. And I think what we've learnt some really big lessons down at Hororo with the current freedom camping opportunities that are there. What was happening for a long time is that you couldn't go there for a picnic because you had freedom campers who were essentially camping there and had been there for sometimes 1 week, but sometimes more than that. So yeah, I'd rather see this particular site just stay as a daytime only sort of venue. But yeah, obviously be keen to see what stakeholder and community consultation you've got planned as well.
So if I can, through the chair, just respond to those questions around freedom camping. I think the camping that is offered on these sites is self-contained vehicles. So maybe the word freedom isn't quite right in terms of that respect. And we have previously in 2019 put signage up on these parks identifying small areas, which we did at Hororo Domain, to try and allow all users to use that site over the summer period, because land was very much well utilised on all fronts during that. So very much take on both of your comments around camping and what can be used there. But I think we need to identify that it is self-contained vehicles only, and obviously at this time, pre the current pandemic that we're involved in, these sites were utilised quite well for that type of camping, but obviously we're in different times at the moment. So I think if we refer to freedom camping as self-contained as a starting point, but recognise that these are conversations we need to also have with key stakeholders about these sites as well.
Thanks for that clarification, Sally. Claire, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I liked the idea that Jim put forward, that we should actually be looking at our whole approach to freedom camping. And in fact, what occurred to me, since I'm not really that close Lake Karapiro and all that, is really what facilities do we have along the Waipa River, along the western side of the district, for people in this area? Because I can see that there will be a lot more domestic sort of visitor campers, and also, you know, a lot of people have bought these mobile homes or campers and things like that they want to be able to park somewhere, and I'd really like to see a bit of work done on making sure that there's really good access and facilities for that kind of visitor. On the western side of the district, certainly along the Waipa River, and that might actually mean that we would encourage setting up of some more camping grounds, whether or not those are council owned or privately owned or something. But just I do think that it's not really well catered for over this side of the district.
Madam Chair, if I could just say to Claire, there's the new camping ground that's about to go in on Prongia Road. It's going through the process of getting, consents and things like that. And you've actually got a very important person living in Pirongia who has a lot to do with the Caravan Association, and that's the self-contained ones, and I'm sure that if there was another site to be found over there, so that we do, and I agree with you, Claire, that we do need something for visitors to park up and take in the beauty of that site, and Pirongia in particular, and the traffic, promoting.
Yeah, absolutely, Hazel. I mean, it did occur to me when we were doing the community plan, spatial plan kind of work, and I thought, that's an opportunity, but I'd love to get that name of that person off you. Just give me a call and we'll do that, because that's, now we've got the one coming in Pirongia Road, which is very closer to Te Awamutu, but it's not very far from Pirongia either, and that's going to be a beautiful car park when it's done, a caravan park, beg your pardon. Yeah, especially as it's close to the Mangapiko stream. So I think getting access to those waterways is a big part of it, which is why these Karapiro Lake reserves are so popular. Yes. Well, thank you.
I'll do that, Claire. Just call me.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to carry on, Tofik, that would be great.
Sorry, so I think Councillor Mike has a question.
Sorry. Oh yes, there he is.
Oh, thank you. Hey, my question could have come in anywhere, really. I guess it's just a bit of a response to Jim, and I think someone else mentioned it, maybe Liz, about freedom campers, or that, I agree, freedom camping is the wrong term, and self-contained is important. But I'd just like to state too, being someone who has one of these camper van things and traipses around the country and sort of mixes it up with staying in proper paid top 10 type places, and then the association type places which are quite cheap, and then the odd freedom place if it's safe, because increasingly people only stay there if they feel safe, to be fair. And already listened to Liz, personally, I don't know if I'd stay in this place at night unless there was a few other camper vans around, because you do feel vulnerable when you're in these things. But I'd just like to state too that the money you save, a lot of people who own these things, they're not after a cheap holiday, they're after a holiday. So if you're saving $60 to $80 a night by not staying in the top 10, for instance, a lot of people spend that money in the town. So they don't spend it at one business like a top 10, they'll spend it in several businesses because they're in your area. So I'd just like to say that the spend through increasingly the people that own these things is quite diverse. Yeah, so it's not, don't think of it as a cheap holiday, like going out in the bush in a tent sort of thing where you spend really nothing apart from what you take. A lot of these people have got money and increasingly are domestic tourists now for the foreseeable future. So they do spend money in the towns that they visit and in the tourist attractions. So I just want to make that point.
And couldn't really agree more with you, Mike, because they spend, there's statistics have been done, and I haven't caught up with the latest ones as to how much our camper van people actually spend, and it's millions throughout the country, because that's what they're going to that place for, is to enjoy. They house their camper van, their contained camper van, and then they go into the town and they eat out and they don't, so you're quite right. And that's a fact that I think people keep on missing.
Thanks, Hazel. Tawfiq.
Thank you everyone for your feedback. So just on that note, our reserve management plan provision on the freedom camping only in the self-contained vehicle is for only 2 consecutive nights. So just want to add that. Anyway, part of this one, as you said, that we want to cater for different range of people as well. So on the northern side, we are proposing to install bollards to provide further area for the vehicle-free picnic area as well, and possibly looking an opportunity to install a picnic table there. We already got 1 picnic table, but as part of this project, we're looking as to provide plant more shade tree to provide a bit more shade around that area as well. Along this boat ramp, we got a bit of a sand and silt accumulation as well. So part of this project would look at to address this option too. I will move on to the next one now. That is Moana Roa Reserve. Again, is situated on the bank of Lake Karapiro. Same access is again through the State Highway 1. In terms of facility, we got a boat ramp and a toilet block for this reserve. One of the issue with this reserve is around the safety as well. So part of so the thing we are looking at first thing to work with the Waikato to look at to remove some of the state highway trees as well, and the plant remove every second popular tree and plant with the suitable native tree as well, just to increase those passive surveillance into the reserve. At the same time, we want to plant more shade trees so people have a bit more shade and they can enjoy their picnic as well. One of our thinking with this reserve as well to remove the bin and promote people to pack in and pack out. Yeah, these are some of the initial sorry, I should have gone for this. I'm so sorry, I should have gone for the second slide. So these were some of our initial thinking with this reserve, as I said, to remove those larger trees closer to the road and further develop the picnic facility. We currently have some issue with the boat trailer parking. And again, it is just our initial thinking to look at if we would like to acquire another extra piece of land to provide more boat trailer parking. Moving on, next one is the Bob's Landing. Again, situated on the bank of Lake Karapiro. Access is through State Highway 1. This reserve basically consists of the regenerative shrub and with the number of mature trees set aside as a recreational reserve, and there's a jetty in place, which used to be used by jet ski club to launch the boat, ski boat from there. They don't use it now. One of the thing we are experiencing in this reserve is again the litter issue. And with the lack of facilities like this, no toilets here, we are thinking to discourage freedom camping in this particular reserve and sort of promote other alternatives to them. The area around jetty is quite shallow, so we are thinking to investigate removal of jetty. And we do also have a slip issue, so part of the concept plan would look at how we can remedy that issue as well. So basically, this reserve is used by picnics for the picnic and the recreational purpose, but gives us an opportunity to do more restoration planting and improve biodiversity around the lake edge.
Mike, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Look, it's just though boat ramps have been placed on these maps, being a user of this lake, many of the boat ramps are pretty substandard in terms of being able to launch and retrieve without a whole lot of stress, particularly over the busy times, and even the shoulder times on weekends when there's a lot of users. You see a lot of people that, don't use their boat that often, that aren't that confident. They get themselves all tangled up, and some of these boat ramps are often only they're sort of single-use, single-vehicle boat ramps, or they might be two if you know what you're doing, if you can go right to one side. So a lot of these boat ramps themselves actually need looking at and upgrading into sort of truly double-use, double-vehicle, double-launch boat ramps. But I agree with what you're saying here. That is a very shallow area, and unless you dredge it, and you're probably not allowed to, I would support getting rid of the boat ramp in this particular area. It probably causes boats more damage than anything else. Thank you.
So if I can just through the chair in terms of respond to that, the boat ramps will be part of this piece of work to look at them, recognising that there are some challenges existing with the existing boat ramps, so that will be part of the work.
Thanks, Ellie. Thank Councillor Mike for your feedback. Next one is Hororo Domain. It's really popular. Again, access is through State Highway 1. In terms of our facility, we got a toilet block and 2 concrete boat ramps. However, one of the ramp is used by the Pirate Ski Club and has been closed to public. So in terms of our thinking is to monitor visitor number through the using of camera as well, because this is hugely popular. So it's good to gauge how many number of visitors we are getting at this reserve. At the same time, carrying on the theme from previous one, to develop more vehicle-free parking area. So we are proposing to install bollards here to provide more vehicle-free parking area. At the same time, in terms of the facility, we only got the toilets. We are looking at how we can enhance the freedom camping in the self-contained vehicle by looking at facility like showers or a dump station, or even look at the portable water. So all of our Lakeside Reserve I believe currently don't have the portable water. So there's something we're looking at the Hororo Domain, how we can look at providing portable water. And again, carrying on the same thing as well, to remove some of the popular tree and replant it with the more suitable trees. Yeah.
Okay, Liz, then Mike.
Yeah, hey, thank you. This is, first of all, thanks to Sally and the team. You guys have already done a huge amount of work in this area, tidying up the freedom camping debacle that we really kind of had, but it's much, much better. Just a couple of comments. Firstly, there are a number of events that are held here where the water in front of that whole reserve is actually booked out. So there are a number of times of the year where this whole space can't be used, and it is kind of taken over, I guess, by whatever the event is. Most of the time it's the Pairere Water Ski Club. So just making that point that sometimes this area has to be closed, and there is often traffic parking issues that extend all the way out onto the road as well. So just something to be mindful of. The other thing, and I'm going to just say this because I get this question a lot, and I know it's going to open a can of worms, but the fact that we have a public excluded area, on the southern end of that reserve kind of needs to be addressed, because I'm not sure that's all that legal, let's just say. So it's something that I know has been a bit of a bugbear for a lot of people, that there's such a big part of the reserve that you can't access where it is actual public land. So I just feel like this is a good opportunity maybe to address that.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Mike.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really premium domain. This is a really premium piece of real estate next to the water. Just down there, you'll see some vehicles parked up in the sort of middle of a screen at the bottom there, which I'm assuming is Alan Easton's place, and they'll all be sort of campers that are paying him. But this is an area where maybe free doesn't have to be, through electronic means, etc. You know, I'm sure a lot of people don't mind paying for a premium place like this, but it's right on the lake. It's got nice reserve. It's got big trees. If the toilet facilities are upgraded, and you're talking about maybe putting in showers and that sort of thing, this is something where electronically, I'm sure we could look at an option of paying a nominal fee per person or per camper vehicle or caravan. I'd just like to see that thrown in the mix rather than just everything free. That some of these things, there could be nominal fees, and most people are pretty good at paying this. You know, most people are pretty good. You just have it on your phone if someone came and checked, that you just show, yep, I've paid it, and that sort of thing. So just to throw it in the mix for a site like this.
I'd just like to say that that's a really good suggestion, Mike. And if we are considering that council would be involved in some kind of camping ground business, I've heard of a really good community model where the facility's set up and you get some people from the caravan association that will offer, you know, like you do a deal with them, and they'll provide a supervision kind of this for free staying there, you know, over the summer, and you know you let them get something like $10 a night or something, and there's some models where you get really good revenue from it actually, and it means invest in the facilities over time, and it's not something the ratepayers have to fork out for.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, it's just like the dock huts. You can buy a little ticket or an annual pass, stay in there as many times as you like. But the other key advantage with this site is its location to the state highway. It's just, the location is just perfect. You know, it's going north, going to Tauranga, going south. So it's a really desirable place to go. So yes, looking into some sort of ticketing system for it would be really great.
Thank you for your feedback on it, and we'll take note of this. Thank you. Next one, moving on, is Bulmer's Landing. This reserve is situated on the Lake Arapune. In terms of facilities, we got a 3-bay boat ramp here and a toilet block. However, this reserve has been subjected to a lot of vandalism. The long lockdown hasn't been kind to this reserve. In terms of the vandalism, we have toilet block that's been damaged by the fire. We have the trees chopped down and burnt by the user. So if I go back to the next one, yeah. In terms of the northern side, we need to resow the grass because there's no longer grass. Kids been driving on it. So yeah, there's a lot of vandalism happening, and then the litter issue is another big thing here as well. So in terms of the work, we have to look at how we can remediate those winter damage and also resow those grass as well. At the same time, develop the reserve sign to sort of promote more regulation and stuff. And because of all this, and we are thinking to install automatic entrance gate and the turnaround area. At the same time, by the toilets, we are thinking of installing steel gates and rocks. So these are some of our thinking, and at the same time undertaking the restoration planting, providing more shade planting closer to the water so people can enjoy the picnicking area. At the same time, because of this vandalism issue, we are thinking to investigate prohibiting freedom camping at this particular site. Next one is Arapune Landing. This reserve is situated on the lake, on the shore of Lake Arapune. With this reserve, in terms of facility, we got a toilet block on the northeast boundary, as well as a 3-bay concrete boat ramp and a metal access to the picnic area. In the second picture, we have this land that's been vested to Ngāti Kuruki Kahukura as part of the settlement claim. It's been managed by the joint management body, Ngāpai Whenua. So that is the joint management bodies between NKK and Waipa District Council that manage this this piece of land. In terms of our thinking, again, we want to do a reserve signage here with the zone and other regulation. We have 2 toilets here, but they are quite old. So we are thinking to enhance those toilet facilities. And another thing, we want to remove those pine tree as well and do more restoration planting work along the boat ramp. Between the main access to the reserve and the house area, the area is quite weedy at the moment. So we are thinking to plant up that area as well. At the same time, the top north area is currently being undeveloped. So we want to develop that area working with Mana Whenua. And because this reserve are joining the Ngāpai Whenua land, so we want to work with Mana Whenua to understand the implication of that on this reserve while developing the concept plan. So carry on the discussion. We will be discussing working with Mana Whenua for all the reserves anyway, but this one have that Ngāpai Whenua land. So just to understand the implication would be a big part of this reserve. Next one is, these are some of the key stakeholders which we have identified, and would like to get your guys feedback on it, like if we have missed anything. In terms of the lake user, we are thinking the Pirate Ski Club would be a good one to consult with as well. And we will be working with Mana Whenua Regional Council at the same time in Wakakotai, because most of our reserve is adjoining State Highway 1. So these are some of the stakeholders we have identified so far. Next one, in terms of the funding.
Sorry, can I just ask as well? It would be nice to actually talk to the users at those boat ramps and stuff, because I'm a user of that boat ramp, and it'd be nice to have, like, you know, pontoons there or something, or actually get feedback from people who do use those facilities. Because I think on those stakeholders lists, you haven't actually got any actual users.
Oh, so we sort of did the high-level lake users. So again, yeah, we're going to carry on the discussion. So our thinking is to do initial targeted engagement first to develop the draft plan, and then go out to wider public for the feedback. But that's a really good feedback, and we can see how we can integrate into our work program. Obviously, COVID is having a huge implication with the going out and interacting with the stakeholder, but hopefully we are out of this lockdown soon. So next term, in terms of the funding, we got some funding around 50K each in year 1 and 2. We are looking to develop a concept plan from that, and then year 3 to 10 we are looking at implementation. However, we only have around 27K in year 4, and around 29 in year 7. So in terms of the implementation, there would be minor work, and if there's any urgent work that needs to be done, again, that's all going to come down from the action plan. So that's how we're going to prioritize those projects. We do have some funding in the CAPEX, which can be implemented for the minor work. However, there's already projects being lined up from that CAPEX money, such as erosion control and the bollard work at Keely's Reserve. Another CAPEX work would be looking at removing mature pine tree from Arapune and Bob's Landing, and erosion control work at Hororo. So there is a little bit of money CAPEX that could be used to implement minor work, but that's all the funding we have. So in terms of funding and how that issue been raised earlier, we are looking at working with how we can look at acquiring more external funding. So when we are having the discussion with the stakeholder, perhaps it would be good to bring that early on in the discussion as well, and see how we can, once the concept plan been adopted, we can approach them for the external funding, which then can go for further implement the concept plan.
Mike, did you have a comment?
Yeah, look, thank you, Taufik, for that. And just seeing these, the amounts here which are in the papers, I mean, they are obviously very minimal. So I guess one of the things hopefully you'll consider is this 22 million, or the money that's been given to all these councils. If this Three Waters thing goes ahead, a couple of the criteria there are community wellbeing and consulting with mana whenua. So, a lot of the stuff you've brought up here would really fit well into those two criteria that come off the top of my head. So again, I'm sure that 22 million will become a lolly scramble in the end, one way, shape or form. So it's something to consider when you're looking at these, because these are all really good wellbeing, sort of outdoor, healthy Kiwi sort of projects. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point, Mike. Andrew.
Thanks, Susan. I just want to make the point that a big chunk of that 22 million is going to be for our stranded overheads and all sorts of stuff like that before we start getting into any kind of lolly scramble. So yeah, I wouldn't be counting too much on that stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Finance Man.
Agree with that.
Taufik, back to you.
No, thank you for feedback. I would appreciate any money possible to implement it, to be honest. So yeah, looking forward to that. Anyway, so I just have one last slide just to showing in terms of the next step. So currently, we have already scoped out the project. I'm here to get you guys feedback on it. Then we're gonna go procure a consultant to work with us to develop the draft plan. And the process where we are taking this to undertake that targeted engagement with the different stakeholders we have identified. And same process we have followed on the previous concept plan is to develop the draft plan, then go to community consultation. So these are the next step in the thinking. That's it from me. Thank you. Happy to take any further questions.
Oh, thanks, Taufik. Really very impressive amount of work you guys have done. It's pretty clear you've thought in great detail about each of these reserves, so it's good to see. Does anybody else have any other questions? Oh, Graham?
Yeah, thank you. Taufik, a couple of weeks ago, the Cambridge Council has had a photo shoot down off the reserve of Dominion Ave by the river here, just down from the new pool. And I need to tell you that is in a shocking state. It is terrible, and it just belies a beautiful reserve that is so close, so heavily used, great for fishermen and people. But the access has been all washed out. It needs a lot of metal. There's a lot of mud. There's a lot of massive potholes full of water. And it really is, I can't think of a better word to say, it's disgraceful. So if somebody could have a look at that and attend to it possibly before the Christmas period, be very, very well. We'd be very, very pleased with that. I think some of the other councillors with me can understand what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Through the chair, we'll definitely pass that feedback on to the team and see what we can do. Thank you.
Marcus, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think just like actually talking to the boat users and stuff and the other users of those areas, because it's not just people launching boats, like the way that those areas are being used is changing. And maybe look at some other ways that user pays maybe for launching boats or something to help with the maintenance of those areas.
Right, any other comments there from anybody?
Yes,
No?
for me, I do not support that at all.
Like a boat launch license or something, like a duck shooting license, no, fishing license. Right, any other questions or comments? No. Nobody has a hand up. Excellent. Hey, look, thank you so much, Sally, Taufik and team. As I said before, a lot of work's clearly gone into that presentation and the thinking around each of those reserves, which is really exciting to see. And let's just hope we all win lotto next time round. We can see it all come to fruition very quickly. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for your time, and thank you for your guys' feedback. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you
Thanks,
too.
Tawfiq.
Thanks, Tawfiq. Thanks, Sally.
Right. Now, where are we in this?
What
We
time
have
we
a
back?
lunch break.
Yay.
We're supposed to come back at 12:30, but we are 12:30 now. So how about we have